And the last aspect in developing a rubric is now to add the scoring or the measurable aspect. Now, scores and marks are not essential, but they do enable the learner to receive an overall measure of how they actually performed. So it's important for us to see whether scores are necessary or not necessary. Now, there are 4 important steps when you're allocating scores. And we're going to take you through each of these individually, but I just want to give you an overall view of what these steps are. The first is to identify the total score for the task. Next, we allocate percentage importance to each criteria. Then we allocate a maximum score to the highest level, and then weight each level decreasing from the maximum. So you can see it's a whole process. It's not just suddenly putting a score to a criterion or a score to a descriptor. It's going through it methodically to make sure that the right score is given to each level and to each description. So let's start with step 1. The first thing is to identify the total score for the task. Now, this might have been predetermined in a curriculum, or you might want to decide what you'd like the total to be out of. So you must decide now whether you want 10 marks, 20 marks, 100 marks. Just remember, the higher the total number, the easier it is to allocate the percentage weighting for each criterion and allocate scores for each. The total task can always be converted afterwards. So even if you want a total out of 10 marks for the end for your report or for your putting in marks, rather start with a higher number. So in this case, I think we're going to decide on this particular task we want out of 50 marks. So now we've decided on what the task score or the total score for the task is going to be. Now we need to divide these marks according to the different criteria. So in order to do this, we need to allocate a percentage of importance to each criteria. So here the levels are not important at all. Here you're looking at just the criteria. So in this case, we had 5 different criteria. Remember, right in the beginning, that's what we decided on. So now I'm going to sit and I'm going to look at each criteria. I'm going to say, right, weighting wise, which are more important and which are less important? So I've decided to put the percentages like this. So I'm saying that the providing factual recount is 36%. Understanding of the leader's contribution to democracy is 24% of the total. Research is 16%, choice of words and explanations is 12%, and the writing process is 12%. So that's what I've decided on here. Now I've used percentages. You can use anything you like. Here's another method of doing it, is using ticks and saying, well, I'm going to divide X amount of ticks between the task, and I'm going to say, right, the first criterion gets 3 ticks, the second 2, and the rest of them gets 1 tick. You can decide however you want to do this. It doesn't matter. The point is you've got to weight the criterion. Right, then the next step is you've got to allocate a maximum score. So now, depending on whether you've done percentages or whether you've done ticks, and I'm going to do both the methods for you to show you how to do it, you need to decide what is the maximum score for each of these criterion. Remember, we said we wanted the total score to be out of 50 marks. So now, if we're working on percentage, we say the total score, which is 50, divided by 100%, because of course that is the method that we used, and the weighting of each unit equals the weighting of each unit. So here we've got 50 divided by 100, which means that each percent equals half a mark. So if we work that out, we say that if we're going to have a total of 50, the first criterion is going to be out of 18 marks, 12 marks for the second one, research is 8, and then the choice of words and explanations in the writing process, each 6. If we did it on ticks, similar sort of process, but now we're looking at total score divided by the total ticks equals the weighting of each unit. So we had 8 ticks in total, so 50 divided by 8 equals 6 1/4, and therefore each tick equals 6 1/4 marks. So there we multiply there. And you'll see it's fairly similar weighting. The percentage is just a little bit more accurate, but that is totally up to you. The important part is, in both cases, you get a total out of 50 marks. So now we need to allocate the maximum score to each of the criterion. You'll see there the maximum, we look at each one, is is on the end. So we've got level 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, but the maximum they can get is 18, 12, 8, 6, and 6. So now we need to take that maximum and we need to start looking at each level. So of course, level 5 would be between, or the maximum would be 18 marks, but you don't just want 18 marks, you might want a range of marks, and that's fine. You can have a range of marks. So in this case, we've put a range of marks of 16 to 18, and the rest we've worked out down to level 1, which is between 1 and 4 marks. This again is entirely up to you. You don't have to have ranges. You could have just said 1, 5, 9, 13, and 18. That's also fine. That's totally up to you. For the next one, we said between 11 and 12 was the maximum, and then filled in the rest going down. And the same with the rest. So you can see how you have to start with the top one and spread it down. From there, we need to actually put it into the rubric. So your rubric could look something like this. So there you have your criterion down the left-hand side. You've got your levels across the top, your descriptors in the middle, and each descriptor has a mark allocation. Now, how do we go about marking this? Because that's the most important part. So here's a description, and let's say that this is an example of a full rubric, and this is downloadable if you want to have a look afterwards. This is the full rubric that we would have developed of this task, and you'll see all the criterion down the left-hand side and the descriptors at the top. So now let's say we're marking someone's work, and we say, right, let's look at the first, providing factual recount of the leader. Well, they are on the can and can't do level, and they're pretty much in the middle, so we're going to give them an 11. The next, understanding leaders' contribution to democracy. Well, this learner has done exceptionally well. They've earned a 10, but it's not quite a 12, but they're still sitting on level 5. Research, they're sitting on level 4, so they get a 7. Choice of words and explanation, between a 3 and a 4, so we've given them a 3. And then the writing process, we've given them a 5. So in total, this learner is getting 36 out of 50. Now, the beauty of developing a rubric that is so comprehensive, if you have a look at those criterion, a lot of projects that you give the learners will consist of research, choice of words and explanation, and writing process. So you can use those criterion and descriptors over and over again. You do not have to reinvent the wheel every single time you set up a rubric. So it's really good to keep a collection of these rubrics. Now, once you've seen this, you will be able to, in the next module, download a whole lot of examples of these rubrics, or of rubrics, including oral rubrics, project rubrics, and essay writing rubrics, where you can use these in your teaching and download them, use the wording, and make any changes you need to.